Hello and welcome to the Voices of Victory channel. I am your host, Mario Leone. Welcome aboard on this magic carpet ride. We are almost ready for takeoff. Today's episode is the mental recipe of perfection. When people are perfectionists, we have to understand the difference between adaptive perfectionism and maladaptive. You could look at adaptive perfectionism as the healthy perfectionism that comes out of Japan. Healthy, note the word healthy there. Now that being said, what is a mental recipe? How does it influence who we are? How does it influence our perfectionism as well? Well, the very first core concept I want you to understand is like you have your personality, you have your triggers, and think of your mental recipe as your mode of operation. It is your mode in the way you see the world, the rules you have for perfectionism, what is required by you or what you think is required by society. And all of that falls into the big picture of the mental recipe. And it's that mental recipe that's actually hurting you the most when you are triggered. And that mode of perfectionism actually kicks in. That's what's very important for you to know. Now, where did this actually come from in the grand scheme of things? Well, we could look at it from a sense of parenting. It came from our parents primarily. If it didn't come from your parents, it came from someone who was an authority in your life that influenced you in some way, shape, or form. That being said, it is a dysfunctional parent mode. When we look at the big picture of everything, it's those internal voices that are in your head that say it needs to be this way, it needs to be that way, it needs to happen in this path. Now, if you had someone who was a parent who criticized you the most, essentially you've adopted that self-talk in your own mind. And that became that inner voice that every time you couldn't get something right, you would beat yourself up, you would attack yourself, and you would hurt yourself. These voices that are present, they have a tendency to devalue you, make you feel unwanted, not important. Those are the internalized messages from early childhood that came from an authority or a parent. Could be a bully even, could be a strict teacher, and now as an adult, they live rent-free in your mind. So a lot of perfectionism and that mental recipe of perfectionism has a few emotions that are baked into it. The very first one is the guilt-inducing parent. The parent that liked to induce guilt on you. Now, how they induced that guilt was they demanded that you sacrifice yourself for other people. And this is what happens, is people will hand over their self-esteem to the rest of the world, feeling that you have to sacrifice. You have to sacrifice to the point where you have to suffer. So that becomes a martyrdom syndrome at best. So what the parent does is they start to guilt trip you a great deal and say, you're an egotist, you're not allowed to have your needs met, you have to sacrifice for other people. Then they will say, you are bad, you're horrible, if you have your needs met first, you are a problem. Now we also have the punitive parent. Punitive, the word P-U-N, punitive, punish, you could equate that very easily. The punitive parent is different. Their approach is a whole lot more insidious. The punitive parent didn't allow any basic pleasure whatsoever. There was no basic pleasure allowed. The punitive parent will say things like, you are bad, ugly, terrible, and you deserve to be punished. This is another mode. This becomes that mental recipe sooner or later, where you say, I don't deserve this, I don't deserve that. I'm not deserving of a good life. I'm not deserving to have a life of success. I'm not deserving, because that punitive parent, that voice becomes their mental recipe later in life. So that is literally, that's the two aspects of guilt and punishment. So what can we do in this whole process? Like, what can we actually do to tap into that? What tools do we actually have to work with this mental recipe? Well, you have to be able to identify it first. Journaling is a great way to actually do that. So I want to give you a set of tools as a form of steps that can help you. Let's start with the first one. To break the entire pattern, you first have to recognize the pattern. So the very first step is identify the trigger. What event actually took place? The second thing is name that mental recipe. So we'll just call it the perfection recipe. I am going to say don't use your name. If your name is Joe or Jane, don't say perfectionistic Jane or perfectionistic Joe. Avoid doing that. If you just call it the recipe, it's a little bit more neutral. When you start to attach things to your name that connects to your identity, makes it actually harder to break free from. So that's important. Now, outside of naming that mental recipe, take a moment to just be in your body, scan your entire body, and ask yourself where it's coming from. Like, where do you feel any discomfort? Pit of your stomach, knotted up in the throat, can't breathe, and just write that down. Write that down. Scan that body. And the last part is find that need. We have to look at the need. There's some kind of need that's there. What is it that you want from this? What do you get from this? Is there some kind of gain that you get from being perfectionistic? Something to look at. What is the actual unmet need that's hiding underneath, that's buried? So when you identify what that mental recipe is, when you figure that out and you start to journal, it's going to be important for you to challenge your old beliefs. What else could this mean? That's a great question. What else could this mean? When you start to look at things objectively, you'll realize that there's a belief and then there's a counter belief. The counter belief is where the healing actually is. So let me give you an example. I'll just give you a real simple example. Our development is best when we go towards our opposites. That's how we develop. So for example, if you're a person that has had a lot of fear about doing certain things, what's the opposite of fear? Courage, being bold. These things are opposite. So the same thing occurs with the mental recipe, is that when you come to perfectionism is part of that mental recipe. What's the opposite of perfection? Well, most people would say, they say it's mistakes or to be flawed or to go down that road. They will think that way. But it's actually stepping into self-approval, approving of yourself. That's the first major step. Understanding iteration, that everything you do is a update, an iteration. Some things aren't going to be perfect on the first shot, so you have to be able to update your changes, the things that you do, you update them. So when it comes to perfectionism, understand that you're a constant unfolding, like your identity and as a human being, you're constantly unfolding, constantly changing. So maladaptive perfectionism versus adaptive. When you're adaptive, it's completely different, okay? Adaptive means to adapt. You keep working on it until it gets exactly where it needs to be, rather than trying to get it perfect the first time. This is like someone shooting a bow and arrow. They want to hit the target on the first shot, but they fail to be in the process of focusing on the pull, focusing on the quality of the pull, the quality of your stance, being in the moment so much so that you are in the process. And as a result, you hit the target based on the byproduct of being in the process. That's all I'm going to say. Don't forget, like and subscribe and share. See you on the next video.